I know that long-winded explanations of mind-numbingly simple game mechanics and self-deprecating humor is more my style when it comes to these reviews, but it's about time that I take a few notes from Pokemon and evolve into my final form, and hopefully without the use of any kind of crystal, as I'd rather not have a raid on my house ending with a cop's knee in the back of my neck. This time I'm going to take a different approach and beat the world record for the fastest yet the most concise and accurate review of this game ever made, and since I have a keen sense of the people who will be watching this documentary on how not knowledgeable I am about game design, I know exactly how to do it. Okay, here goes. Ghost of Tsushima doesn't have big anime titties. The worst game I've ever played, 0 out of 10. Thanks for watching. Hey, are the weeboos gone? Neat. Let's get to the actual review. Ghost of Tsushima's Past is a PS4 exclusive developed by Sucker Punch, those lovely people who made both the Sly Cooper series and the Infamous series, and I love all of those games dearly. Here's a Texas Pete hot take. Second Son was a fantastic game, and if you think otherwise, I will find you, print out your hentai collection, and beat you to death with it. You hear me, you son of a bitch? Sucker Punch are, in fact, my all-time favorite game developers because they consistently put out quality titles. Even the so-called black sheeps of each series still hit like a steel bat to the chesticle region. I was super hyped for this game when I saw the first reveal, and even more so after playing Sekiro Shadows Die many a times. Despite my hype, I realized that if there's one thing Sucker Punch are not good at, it's making a serious McSerious game that rivals the modern movie industry with the amount of not laughs I'm having right now. Given the Infamous games were pretty serious, but they had their charm and wit to offset this to an extent. On the other hand, the Sly games were 90% goof and only 10% mass murdering of close family members and sexual tension. I know this is mostly just a nitpick because it's honestly just a personal preference that pertains to my underdeveloped gamer boy brain. It's like watching a review of a game with no jokes in it. It just comes off as dry and pruny, like me, while trying to write this script while sober. Trying to write jokes about this game is like being a comedian in a fascist regime. I can try to joke about our new world order and how it's run by a guy that looks like if Rick Ross went on a diet of carbon dioxide and Fiji water for a few years, but inevitably I'm gonna end up eating hot lead and beatings for Sunday dinner. I completely understand what they were going for with this game. They wanted a more grounded approach to every aspect of the game, but understanding it doesn't make the steel bat complete with bleach-soaked spikes in it hurt any less. They don't even have big anime titties, man, and that's just heresy. It's known throughout the cosmos that if you make a game set anywhere near Japan, at least one woman needs titties that will cause more nosebleeds than an MMA fighter, and are soft enough to be printed on body pillows and sold to otakus like me. Because of Sucker Punch's reputation, I went into this game expecting to at some point be laughing so loudly and continuously that my family would consider taking a few notes from Lorena Bobbitt, but instead I came out of it about as stone cold face as Lincoln during Our American Cousin. There's none of that signature Sucker Punch charm in this game, and most of that's due to the story, which is comparable to a documentary on the Bhopal disaster, or your mom. The only way for me to properly get you to understand how beautifully ugly this game is to pull up a chair, get a PhD in reading comprehension, and try not to slit my own wrists in half as I realized that I wasted money on university for this. The only interesting thing about this story is that it's framed as a legend of the main character, as if people are going to be talking about this psychopath murderer for years to come, like if Jin was the Ted Bundy of Tsushima. Considering I'm about to take several watery tapioca bubble shits on this story, you'd have to wonder why it'd be considered a legend in the first place. Despite being a legendary warrior by the end of the game, Jin kinda starts off weaker than the reliability of your state legislators during a pandemic when the Mongol Empire invaded Tsushima, led by Darkside Phil. A band of 80 samurai fought against an entire army to defend their territory. Whoa, wait. You telling me that there were only 80 samurai willing to fight for their island? There were more people willing to fight their own countrymen back in 1861. Fuck me, I already need a sip of this. Alright. The samurai all charge into battle, and it looks like you might win until your uncle gets beaten harder than an abused housewife that has a kink for rough play, and you get 360 cross-map no-scoped Mongolian style. Despite deep-throating an arrow to the spine, Jin survives the encounter. Barely. As he comes to his senses and gets geared up, Yuna, the person who nursed a mostly dead samurai back to full health quicker than the time it takes politicians to change their mind on gay marriage come election time, informs him that the Mongolians took over half the island while he was out. So, anyone want to explain to me how she ended up finding the only survivor of Komoda other than his uncle? Considering he probably wouldn't be moving and be surrounded by other dead bodies. How'd she even know that he'd be in fighting condition after he was rescued, since he took an arrow to the spine, and last I checked, plucking someone's spine the wrong way can paralyze them for life. Those guards and Skyrim must have been the meatiest of sopping wet pussies. Arrow to the knee? Take one to the spine and see how you feel about adventuring. Also, I'm no warmonger, and I also haven't passed out on a beach from blood loss recently, so I need an explanation as to how the fuck was half an island taken over in the time he was out, which was implied to be not that long. If America was this efficient when fighting wars, maybe we'd already have solved the wars on drugs, poverty, terror, and the oil crisis, but I digress. Instead of laying low and hiding like Anne Frank, you decide to fight the Mongolians head-on with such massive samurai balls that they cower in fear at your mere presence. Unless you're trash at video games like most titty streamers. You storm Castle Kaneda the same night with just a two-man team to save your uncle, who I thought died since the cutscene kinda implied that Darkside Phil ran him through with his own sword. Well, he happens to be alive and being held captive until he either starves to death or surrenders, which, why would you even have that kind of stipulation considering he's a samurai, the people almost exclusively known for honor and never giving up even with faced with death? Wouldn't it make more sense just to poke his brain out with a weeb stick and take control, which is what you've been fighting for this entire time? You challenge Khotan Khan, that's him, to a fair fight, but since you were too low on honor, you get your ass thoroughly slapped and yeeted off the bridge. Jin does the Dark Souls collapse emote on the beach before the wind quite literally guides him to Yuna. I know we're at the highest point of Jin's story here, but I have to talk about this. This little mechanic is a way to guide the player to the objective while being both anime as fuck and diegetic, and I love it. To an extent, it does away with the quest markers and having to stare at a minimap and racing lines to your next objective location, keeping the flow of gameplay damn near constant, though you still have the option of using the map instead. If you're a filthy mongoloid, that is. There are other diegetic guidances like flocks of birds being above haiku spots, the plumes of smoke being either survivor, bandit, or mongol camps, and those golden birds that you'll frequently see on your travels that lead you to missions or collectibles. The fact that they don't tell you about these in a standard tutorial and let your own curiosity as a player lead you to figuring these signals out by yourself is the coolest shit I've seen in video games, next to being able to get pixel pussy. By the time you figure it out, you'll find yourself always chasing after these signals on your way to your next destination. I think this is one of the only times in gaming where diegetic guidance is implemented. The other example I could think of is the runner version of Mirror's Edge, but that doesn't even hold a candle to the coolness that is this. After you meet it with Yuna, it's time to form your unwilling posse, that I can't think of a name of right now, but which consists of Sensei Ishikawa, Lady Masako X, a random ass straw hat wearing Ronin, who so happens to be Jin's Chad bro, sorta, and Yuna's brother. For the sake of watch time and bolstering this story section past a couple of sentences worth, I'm giving the rundown of these four people's stories. I know I'm jumping a few light years ahead here, but there are more people you recruit throughout the 3 acts of the game's story. And by more people, I mean one person, because this game is shorter than the length of my dick in kilometers. I'm only mentioning this because after giving the rundown of these 4, I couldn't be fucked to do it for any more people without the urge to kill myself getting stronger with each sentence, and if you haven't been paying attention, it's already at peak capacity. First one I did was Yuna's brother, Taka, who I'm convinced is voiced by a small Asian boy in a sweatshop. You end up saving him from Auschwitz, and meeting up with him back at Komatsu Forge, helping clear it out, and defend the place so that he can craft you the ultimate climbing tool, a hook on a string. What? Fuck it, roll with it. The hook itself is used, alright I guess. You can only grapple to specific points laid out throughout the map, which is kind of disappointing, though still admittedly really satisfying when you get to chain the swings together. I was expecting to be able to spider boy my way throughout the map with the wind on my back and blood everywhere on my body. It would have a risk reward factor to it, since it would be more agile travel than being on foot, but you'd risk splatting on the ground like people leaping from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, because breaking your ankles causes more damage than an arrow to the jugular or an atomic bombing run. This tool is what helps you scale the border walls to get into America illegally. To get into Castle Kaneda to save your uncle. Oh, and Yuna's there too. She exists between the 2D and 3D planes because she's so linear that her only motivation is to get back to the motherland with her brother to start a new life. Yet she's so well rounded in that her motivation makes a 360 motion right back to being retarded in the second act. Unlike Roly Poly Oly over here, Ryuzo, the leader of the Straw Hat Ronins, is quite the expert at 4D chess with the amount of mental gymnastics he posts throughout the game. You travel through the Jake Paul suicide forest and end up meeting with the main man himself. At first it seems like they may have bad blood, but then they have this super bro moment with each other, before being surrounded by a gang of Mongols, and Jesus Christ, why are some of these guys so fucking jacked? Maybe that's why they took over the island so quickly. They had a bunch of Zangiefs with them ready to pile drive any man, woman, or child into the nearest building. After slicing up some more of the Mongols, you find that Ryuzo's men have gone severely hungry and on the brink of collapse, since they lost half of their men. You agree to help in any way you can, as long as they help save your uncle. This leads to a series of failed operations that seems to make Ryuzo more and more cross with you, like it's my fault that I don't know where food is. Oh wait, I do, at the Golden Temple, and Komatsu, and the survival camps. I see his point. I would be cross with me too if I were that mentally incapacitated. Other than Taka, Ryuzo has the most straightforward character missions of the main cast so far. So for the sake of not boring you to the point that Netflix and chilling with dry ice would seem more entertaining, I'm going to shoot my shot over to Sensei Ishikawa. His dojo was attacked shortly after the invasion. Soon after meeting him, he tells you that he taught the way of the boat to this rando peasant named Tomoe instead of Jin. Makes a lot of fucking sense, right? Ha! Wrong! When you find him, he briefly teaches you how to shoot your payload farther and harder than ever before. And my brain must be composed of cement, pudding stirred in salt water gravy. Because I lied to you not, spent 5 minutes on this tutorial shooting the lamps out of order. I wasn't even this lobotomized in high school, and that was around the time when I was the most retarded. Me and old Mad Jenkins raided this Mongol camp to look for his student, but we find out she's a traitor. So, I don't know who ruffled her Jim Jams as bad, because she's putting a bit more effort into wearing the skin of Jane Fonda than the weak-willed millennials of today. Oh boo-hoo, you burned a flag. Try killing innocents for sport, teaching Mongols to be better at archery, and causing chaos by leading teams to capture key points on the map. So the reason for this is that he pushed this girl too hard, and now she's the biggest mad. That's a mental space program if I've ever seen one. How do you go from a student being pushed too hard to a Geneva Convention abolitionist with a touch of stiff and paddock? My mom pushed me hard in school, but never have I wanted to suplex her into the kitchen tile, then ship myself off to Russia to join the hackers to aid in steering American elections. And maybe shank a child. After a few more missions, Ishikawa finally reveals that he's on the level of politicians with the amount of manipulating of the truth that he's done. TLDR, both of his students have turned what they learned against him, and to protect the legacy of one specific clan and his own reputation, he spun the story in a different direction. Kind of like how they say Epstein killed himself. The further you go in the story, the more Tomoe gets desperate, but a wedge is driven between you and Ishikawa, leading to the pettiest of squabbles at the end of each of his tales. This ultimately leads to nothing of note, but what does lead to something is Tomoe escaping. After her consistent failures, the Mongols turned on her faster than the populace turned on Hillary when the emails came out of the closet, leading her to hide out with the abominable Snowcracker Jap. She seeks out your help, not only to get back at them, but to fend off a huge attack that they had been planning. Except she bamboozled you. She was using you to get a safe passage to a boat so she can leave the island. She even leaves a little note for Ishikawa so he can put away his hate boner because he's in a school zone and he's scaring the kids. While that story was so depressingly what the fuck, that being launched into the vacuum of space to be deep fried by the sun's radiation would leave me more satisfied, that doesn't even compare to the crippling manic depression inducing story that is Lady Masako's. Her family was wiped out shortly after the invasion, somewhat because they died at the beaches of Normandy while under sniper fire, and because there were some traitors running amok, using the ruckus from the invasion to pounce on the remainder of her family. You help her go through the stages of grief while also helping her get her revengeance on the people who caused her family to be El Paso'd while on a grocery run. Good thing is, Masako already has a clue as to who was behind it: Sogen, a monk at the Golden Temple. He had visited her just before the Tsushima Katana massacre of 74, acting as a scout, without the funny voice lines and a boomstick. You tail him, realize he's a massive piece of shit, and then Masako creates a chasm in his chest, and I become wrecked with joy as the villain gets a proper ending. So starts a series of missions where you trail and murder each and every traitor, allowing Masako to get her revengeance, except that the plot gets more complicated as the missions go on. Little bits and pieces are dropped in your hands, like the fact that Masako's heirlooms are personally attached to the killer, and the fact that Masako was high-key having an affair with a younger woman. Oh, Masako, you dirty whore. These bits and pieces were ultimately leading to the grand reveal that it was her sister that was the killer and had faked her death at the attack to get away from Masako's wrath. It's a shame that in the process leading up to this, Masako almost killed an innocent monk, as well as, and I heavily emphasize this, attempted to kill the spook. We kiss and make up, proceeding to hunt down her sister. You know, Hannah must be a millennial in a boomer skin suit, because upon meeting her, she's immediately bitching about her life, and then does what I've dreamed of doing for years: committing self-forever sleep. I don't know if you've been paying attention, Lenny, but there's a bit of a pattern here with the characters and their stories, and it's so obnoxious that my brain is raising temperature about 10 degrees, and I'm getting delusional. None of the characters that you meet in this game are interesting and compelling in any way. I guess it's the curse of having an open world game, since making every character meaningful would leave the game in a development hell that lasts longer than most wars. The characters might as well be wearing Octo Camo with how little they stand out in a lineup of video game characters. So many of the auxiliary characters have these tragic stories, whether it took place before or after the invasion. Not a single character in this game has both a generally good personality or positive backstory, and some have neither. Even worse is that all the side missions and the stories within are all so boring that every time I play one, I get the distinct feeling that French kissing a potato peeler strapped with razor blades would be more enticing as an activity. They have the same 3-act structure every time. Go here, talk to your ally, ride off into the sunset to kill some mongoloids, then have a half-hearted introspective conversation with whoever dragged you along, which doesn't even make sense in itself because Jin is the most dishonorable of any person on the island that isn't speaking in Spider, and the characters even acknowledge this. That's like if I criticize someone for how they spend their money, but then on the low I'm blowing my money on hookers and pipe bombs. Don't ask. Is this supposed to be some sort of commentary on our modern society about how as a species we're sinking further and further away from God's image? We damn ourselves to an eternity of cycles of hope, then damnation, then back to hope again. One day praying that we get hope and it sticks like a rice ball in the morning dew. Unlike the aforementioned rice ball, these stories are sliding across the surface of my vaccinated body. Don't get me wrong, within the context of the Mongolian blitzkrieg, the stories serve their purpose of showing the lasting effects of the invasion, as most of this bullshit didn't kick off until Normandy was successfully taken over. They do have some introspection weaved in there, but it's surface level and only relevant to the game and the characters, which is fine, I guess, but it never got me thinking about shit. It made me stare at the screen, sitting in a puddle of my own drool and swamp ass while waiting for the next interesting thing to happen. The only character I even liked out of the entirety of the game was Kenji, because he's such an abhorrent piece of mammoth shit that I couldn't help but be attached to him, since his personality was so different from the stagnant, piss-infused pool water that everyone else's personalities are composed of. Call me mentally sterile if you want, but these side stories don't really have me too interested. Maybe it's because they're so grounded in such reality that I don't feel like I'm playing an amazingly fun game, but watching a documentary on the Holocaust that explains in great detail the political reasons behind the tragedy. And I don't know about you, but I'm not exactly blowing a load in excitement for this history lesson. If you don't mind, I'll be in the back of the class drawing photorealistic dicks on the wall. And with that, the deeply depressed desperados have been formed. You storm Castle Canada with help from your crew and successfully save your uncle. But plot twist, Ryuzo's actually a massive pile of steaming ass mustard. But that's not all, because your Mongolian overlord is in another castle. I'm not gonna lie, this high-key pissed me off like it was supposed to. Yeah, I'm saying something positive for once, and if the rest of the script is anything to go by, there aren't a lot of those. The premise of the second act of this game is to build an army to storm Shimura's castle and take down Koten Khan once and for all. To accomplish this, you send word to the shogun to call for reinforcements, recruit the people of Yarikawa to form an army of peasants, and claim your clan's armor to rep your hood while you storm Stalingrad. At this point, you've probably noticed that I'm giving the story synopsis in a checklist format, and that was intentional, because that's quite literally how the story progresses. Every act you get a grocery list of things to accomplish to get to the main goal, and that's it. There's no fun journey to be had. There's no introspection to be had. I quite literally feel like I'm going to the grocery store to grab watermelon, onions, and KY jelly. Hey, don't judge me. I got weird kinks. The main story in itself isn't really that long or intricate, and maybe that's why it feels like it was neutered at birth. It's the same issue I had with the story of Infamous Second Son, where the story is short, leading to the meat of the game being the superfluous side shit you do just to 100% the game. Since we're comparing the two games' major flaws, the exploration and open world activities in Spectre of Tsushima are in a similar gas chamber, where you'll spend most of your time horseback riding or fast traveling to the next outpost and give those Mongols the deadliest haunting of their currently forfeit lives. If you're not juicing some Mongols, then you're scouting the land for collectibles that are either nothing but lore and trophy bait, grant you aesthetic items, or give you an actual tangible buff when you find enough of them. If you're too lazy to be a real gamer, then there are random bandit and Mongol patrols that you can kill for some extra goodies, or to save a prisoner that'll give you a rumor location. Basically yeeting the exploration factor even further into the Twilight Zone. That's about all you're getting from me, Nemo. I feel like Sucker Punch put way too much effort into making the gameplay, world, and side activities match the setting and plot. So much so that after the first few hours of gameplay, you'd have pretty much done everything you can do in the game at least once, and that doesn't exactly make the quote-unquote open world experience any more enjoyable than sanding my own ball sack down to the diamond-enriched bone. It's almost like the game is too grounded to a fault, especially in the genre it was going for, open world hack and slash. Pay close attention to the former genre, as I explain how this game is comparable to the Battle of the Little Bighorn, with how hard it fails in just about every way in that aspect. See, most open world games nowadays give you a chuckle fuck ton of things to do, usually involving fucking about while being disassociated with the story. The crown king of this would be Grand Theft Auto. The mechanics given to you allow a plethora of things to do, like being a mass murdering sociopath, ramping your car off a mountain until it explodes with you in it, stealing a military jet, and carpet bombing an entire city until you get bored enough to just recreate 9/11 for the 100th time this week, you fucking psycho. Or even driving people around in a taxi. You see what I'm getting at here, Billy Bob? That's only 4 out of the hundreds of things that makes GTA's open world fun to exist in. Even in a lesser example like Saints Row, there's plenty to fuck around with, not even including the dedicated minigames that encourage you to complete them with the highest score possible for the chance to win the grand prize of a lifetime supply of Gamer Girl bathwater. Everything you do in this game has something to do with the main plot in one way or another, and as I've made abundantly clear earlier, for those in the back of the gas chamber, the plot is like drinking a cup of rusty nails and absinthe that's been set on fire. I know I've basically been beating this game over the head with its own steel bat, but one thing I can't really criticize is the graphics, because whoo boy, they are so beautiful that they just cannot be processed by our puny Homo sapien brains. This game is possibly the best looking game on the PS4, fitting as it's at the end of its life cycle. The animation, the colors, the environments, the lighting, the everything. The devs were so cocky about the fact that the sheer beauty of this game would be such a mind-awakening masterpiece that they programmed a screenshot function that's so easy to access and flesh out that it's like they're saying, go on, make that new desktop background. Just riding through these sprawling vistas on horseback is the most satisfying thing to observe, and honestly, it's one of the only things in this game that doesn't make me want to deep throat the barrel of a howitzer. There are even times where the camera will zoom out as you approach a scenic ledge, giving you an overview of the gorgeous landscape they've built. I bet Bob Ross would have loved painting this. On the other side of this beauty is the environmental storytelling. While the parts of this world that are untouched by the Mongols are absolutely stunning with its beauty, places that have been touched by the Mongols are all broken and burned with muted dark colors to offset the vivid brightness of everywhere else. Every place you visit has some story attached to it, even if most of the time it just consists of Mongoloid bad. Another thing I adore is the amount of blood that sprays and coats the character models in battlefields. The blood sprays realistically depending on where and how you slash your opponent. Anytime I stop and look at Jin after a lengthy battle, I feel like I'm playing through a samurai movie. The only disappointing thing about this is that there really isn't much of any gore in this game, except for the occasional decapitation. In a game about running sharp phallic objects through people, I expected to see some limbs flying in various directions, spraying unrealistic amounts of blood all over the battlefield, kinda like an anime. The fact that I want this game to be even gorier is one of the 2 testaments as to why I'm definitely on an FBI most wanted list. The other being that I've said the N-word one too many times in public, while having skin light enough to be considered a house nigga. Now that I've broken out of federal prison, I'm going to continue forcefully infusing your brain with my fever dream driven drivel. I've always been one of those people that champion customization in games, like Incel's champion Elliot Rogers. So when I had discovered that I could customize my outfits and weapon looks to my liking, I was rather pleased, almost to climax. However, I made it my goal to cosplay as Mr. Negative throughout this entire review, so let me tell you why I hate it, but not really. There aren't enough customization options. Actually, that's a complete lie, because there are plenty of customization options given through the missions, merchants, haikus, and exploration. But I get a specific joy out of beating the devs with their own bat for subjecting me to what I can only describe as the ball sack fondle vivisection that is this game. Or is it? Alright, so I have to come clean since the script can't continue if I keep shitting every 5 minutes because of these tapioca bubbles. You've been lied to. I bamboozled you once again, because while I still stand by the fact that the first act of this game is dog shit wrapped in a little gay bow, the last 2/3 of the story is actually fucking alright, and here's why. Once the first act comes to a close, it's almost like every main mission's cutscene wants to either activate your brainstem beyond Neanderthalic impulses, or yank your heartstrings until they break and you turn to alcoholism to fill the void in your carbon-based soul. The key word here is once, because that doesn't mean it succeeds every time. It all starts at the betrayal of Ryuzo. He wants to kill you for the bounty you have on your head, because even ghosts can make it into the bingo books. Obviously, he failed at his goal because I pressed button good, so he went to the Khan for guidance and help for his men. Except he's deeply conflicted about this. So conflicted, in fact, that when he was forced to burn innocent peasants to coax the people inside Shimura's castle to open the gate, his body's hormones went into epileptic shock, trying to decide between grown-ass man and prepubescent girl with the amount of octaves his voice went through. Open the gate! Afterward, you speak to your uncle, and all goes well until he brings up your more nefarious activities. No, not those kind. He doesn't approve of the path you're going down. Shimura is the lawful good to Jin's chaotic good, and this poses a question in your head. Keep going down the path of the ghost or the path of the samurai. As this game has proven time and time again, the path of the samurai leads to massive L's comparable to that of 1940s Germany, or France in all of history. Despite this conflict of methods, when you have this epic ass siege on this fortress so that you can get Shimura's message out to the mainland for Shogun support, Shimura admits that he sent word that he wants to formally adopt you as his son, and that's just I'm not crying. You're crying. No, really, I'm not crying. I kinda don't give a shit. I'm sure you hate crying just as much as I do, so I'm going to distract you with the absolute badassery that are the set pieces in this game. You get a small taste of what set pieces would be like at the end of Act 1, then Act 2 comes in and nukes Act 1 from orbit. From the battle at the fort, to the defense of Yarikawa, to the siege on Shimura's castle, all of the set pieces in this game are phenomenal, even if most of the time I'm just mashing 2 buttons until the game pats me on the head and tells me I'm special. The set pieces make you feel like a samurai, charging into battle with honor on your hip and huge brass balls to crush your enemies with. Alright, break time's over. Time to cry until you shrivel up like testicles in the snow from all the moisture evacuating your body. Soon after your balls drop a whole inch from the sheer man energy being absorbed into your body, you'll exude that energy right back into the cosmos when you break down into tears reminiscing about your past with a close friend of the Sakai family, and it's how you say, big sad. Despite it being a large quantity of SAD, the lore and backstories of this game are genuinely good. Nothing groundbreaking or particularly enticing, mind you, but it fits the setting, story, and characters perfectly. I won't go too deep into it because I believe it's best experienced on your own. There's simply too much here for my weenie gamer brain to handle, and the script is already approaching the size of a Muammar al-Gaddafi speech. Alright, if this gets any sadder, I'll start thinking playing chicken with a mom van is a good idea. Man, I've really gotta stop drinking. You reclaim your father's armor, and then head on down to Old Yarikawa to raise an army against the Khan. Unfortunately, these people kinda hate you because of your association with Shimura, since he put down a rebellion that was brewing in Yarikawa a while back. So to prove that you're only there to help, you assist in saving some soldiers that were captured by the Mongols. Taka actually fights in this mission, and that causes a very small rift between you and Yuna, since she's hell-bent on protecting her brother till the end. This rift is quickly shut with a bottle of sake, or 2, or 5. I like how these people think. You sober up unrealistically quickly due to the current situation of Mongols attacking the stronghold. You beat them back, and obviously because you are the main character, you talk no jutsu your way into having an army by your side. However, things go south when you're informed of Ryuzo's location. You confront him, and he tries to convince you to convert to his side, since the Khan sees Jin as a massive threat, but also a very useful asset if convinced, since he has no limits, unlike the rigid code-following samurai. This doesn't work, so to further convince you, you're knocked unconscious and captured for further convincing. Also, Taka gets captured like an idiot. Now, I'm gonna break away from the story just for a second to rant about this shit in particular. When at any point would this happen? You have hearing that spans like 50 meters in gameplay, and it's so precise that you can outline an entire enemy, and when upgraded, you can tell if the person you're about to kill will attract attention. This is some Sharingan levels of busted, so why could anyone, let alone some random ass raggedy hat wearing Ronin, sneak up on him? On top of that, you aren't just outright killed, which would have ended the rebellion right then and there, because Jin is the only reason they got this far. To top off this pyramid of bullshit, you're wearing armor. There's no way one little slap to the back is going to knock you out, especially considering that in normal combat you can get cleaved, stabbed, shot, and blasted pretty much infinitely so long as you have the health to tank it. And even when you're knocked off your feet, you just pop back up like a random boner in high school, and just like one, you never stay down unless all of your juices have been squeezed out of you. I'm sorry, not sorry for ranting, because this is a thing that plagues video games. If I'm badass in gameplay, let me be just as badass when I'm watching a cutscene. Rant over. Back to your regularly scheduled story beats. The Khan himself asks you to convince your people to join him in his conquest so that they can have peace. But of course, Jin refuses, so the Khan tries to manipulate Taka into killing you. But like the Chad bro that he is, he attempts to turn on the Khan, and for his efforts, he wins a beheading and the best ugly cry I've seen all year. You eventually break free and grab your gear that they left next to the guy that was only restrained by gaming's equivalent to silly string, kill some Ronin and Mongols with Yuna, and then meet back at camp once Taka has had a proper burial. I was on a time crunch, and by that I mean I was close to blacking out from the amount of alcohol I was ingesting to ignore the pain, so I quickly started the raid on Shimura's castle. The plan goes perfectly until the Mongols send horses strapped with dynamite across the bridge, which leads to the bridge being destroyed and the siege put to a temporary standstill. Your conflict with Shimura comes to a head after this, leading to Shimura giving Jin the cleanest bitch slap I've ever seen. This makes Jin real big mad, and he storms out to devise a plan with Yuna, which ends up being to poison the fermented milk that the Mongols are drinking. So you do just that, leading to your final confrontation with Ryuzo, where you finally put that traitorous dog down where he belongs. 6 feet under your massive bullocks. After this, the samurai make it across the bridge and witness the beauty that is this carnage. Unfortunately, the samurai aren't psychopaths, so they disapprove. Shimura demands that you blame Yuna for the poisoning and renounce the ghost so that you could still be his son at the end of the war. Jin must be a mind reader because he gave his uncle a big old double middle finger to that idea, just like I would have given the opportunity. He spends the next few days in prison for his crimes, only to be broken out by Kenji, allowing him to travel north to the last section of the island to meet up with Yuna. The escape goes awry and you were seen just before getting out, leading to your horse taking a few arrows to the thigh meat before you get away. You run and run and run until... I need a minute.
Want a Sprite, cranberry? I sawed this boat in half!
Something's gone wrong in a happy-go-lucky world of Nintendo. This is the Brown Bros.
Alright, let's just keep going. You make your way past a group of Mongols to get to Yuna, only you get spotted again, shot with arrows again, and pass out from poison and blood loss. Whoa, wait, that's new. Yuna inexplicably finds and saves you again, getting you back into action despite the fact that a highly lethal, fast-acting poison was just directly injected into your veins. The poison is so fast, in fact, that it instantly kills anyone hit by the poison darts, leaving them on the floor vibrating furiously and choking in their own blood. So how did Jin survive? Again. I'm having a hard time believing that he isn't the fucking Terminator with how much damage he casually shrugs off. After proving your might in ritualistic poisoning, your next objective is to kill the Khan, and you do just that when you raid the port he's on and run a sword through his gut. I would speak more on this part, but all of the missions really just consist of preparing for the raid up until the climactic fight. Kind of like the rest of the plot. Now, I'm going to put a big, thick, sad warning right here. If you do not wish to die of big, sad disease, then I suggest you skip ahead a couple of minutes. Or not. I'm not your real dad. Unless you want me to be. Shimura sends word that he wants to meet with you at the Sakai residence, right where your father was buried, to have one final battle between the two ideologies. And in the end, the path of the ghost won because Allah willed it. At this point, you were given the option to either spare Shimura or kill him. I personally chose to spare him because I might have a blackened void for his soul, but I'm not a heartless killer. Fair enough, I guess. The story is passable, not too great, but it's also not completely abysmal since it did have some really good moments, but that's all they were. Moments. All the story needed was some personality, because it was by far one of the most generic stories I've played through in quite some time, and I've played through the game of life. The problem mostly stems from the fact that throughout the 3 acts of the story, you do the same exact thing. You gather up allies and intel so that you can storm a castle of some sort. It serves its purpose of being a plot that doesn't trip over itself, but at the cost of everything else that a plot needs to be more engaging than the plot of the Big Bad Wolf or the Bible. This game is more about revengeance than Metal Gear Rising, and that's the game with the fucking word in the title. If I can sum up a story in one sentence and have that sentence be accurate to the entirety of the story, then it needs more rewriting than a Trump speech. I feel as if the story should have been made girthier as well, as it would give me more time to fill up this wall with dicks. Despite my deep-fried indifference for the story, the gameplay so happens to be some of the best samurai hacking and slashing I've ever had the unbridled delight of taking part in, and thankfully this game isn't held together with paperclips and Elmer's glue, or I'd have an easier time being inevitably disappointed when I put it under a telescope. After playing this game, you'll find yourself keenly interested in buying a katana off of Amazon and taking it to the abdomens of those who dare defy your will, or those who bullied you for buying a katana off of Amazon. Engaging in the combat is some of the only times in the game where I didn't feel like my brain was so completely sanitized it could kill 99.9% of germs. Like Sekiro, Shadows may die 2 or more times, the combat revolves around the dance between attacking, using tools, dodging, blocking, and parrying, and how that dance creates a sort of rhythm in the combat. Now, While in concept, the combat is fairly similar, the spook of Tsushima goes in a more hack and slash direction with the combat. You'll find yourself sometimes tangoing with several overly buffed and heavily armed men at once. So many in fact, that I can visualize the Rule 34 of this game before it's even become a thing. Though given the tone of the game, I imagine all of the porn of it will be horrendously vanilla and they'll only have one facial expression: suicidal. Throughout the game, you'll collect different stances by killing or observing the leaders of Mongol camps. You get 4 in total: stone, water, wind, and moon, that all boil down to use specific stances heavy attack on specific enemy type for massive stagger damage, essentially becoming a game of brutal dance revolution. While in concept, dancing to a K-pop song while slicing a mongoloid clean in half sounds engaging on at least an unvaccinated lobotomite level, in execution it ends up being leagues less engaging than the stances in Neo, especially when you consider that there are more varied weapons in that game that basically get 3 whole movesets each with the stances. Even worse is the fact that each stance in Neo feels different to play with, even if they boil down to dodgy, blocky, and stab hardy. The different stances in Poltergeist of Tsushima do nothing to actually alter the gameplay in any meaningful way, since they only change the idle stance and give different heavy attack, hold, and mash animations, even if the animations are admittedly stylish. The problems compound even further into the supernova of shit when you realize that every enemy in this game is designed so that you can beat them without even needing to use any of the stance's specific heavy attacks, since a proper dodge or parry followed with a counterattack is more than enough for any enemy. However, the hold heavy attacks are a different beast, seemingly being useful against all enemies, not just the ones that are arbitrarily decided the stance is useful against. The ones that I found the most useful in combat were the water stance, since the hold heavy attack is a quick multi-hit that deals more than enough stagger damage to break an enemy's guard with the right setup, then enough regular damage to kill any enemy if you're that weirdo that refuses to use quick attacks when they're open, and the wind stance, since being able to start the Tsushima space program with a kick straight to the jaw does put a huge shit-eating grin on my face. Both of these also have the benefit of being some of the most anime shit in this game. I never got much use out of the stone stance stabs until later on when the Control-C, Control-V on the swordsman enemies was at its most obnoxious, but I much preferred water and wind. Also, Moon is trash, because while the attack is a nice 360 sweep, it's too slow, does as much damage as cock slapping someone with a micro dick, and seems to give both you and the enemy hyper armor, leading to several cases where I ended up with 36 stab wounds and an arrow in the knee before I managed to kill anyone with it. On the opposite end of Moon stance is the Ghost stance that you get at the end of the Yarikawa arc. After killing a certain number of enemies without getting hit or stealth executing a Mongol leader, you can activate your Devil Trigger. Upon activation, it will terrify all enemies around you while also giving you 3 insta-kills on any enemy that isn't the boss. Though it will still scare the shit out of bosses, and that is the most cathartic thing to watch. The stance is more satisfying to use from a lore standpoint, since at this point in the game, the rumors of the Ghost has spread like HIV at a gay wedding. So it makes sense that seeing the Ghost in person will make enemies evacuate their bowels faster than Earl Bradley comes at a pediatric center. I'll give the game this: the hold heavy attacks are all powerful and useful in some way, except Moon stance, toward the singular goal of putting any Mongol you come across in the ground. But at the end of the day, it still doesn't amount to much in terms of substance. I mean, I guess the stances add an extra layer to the combat if you're a smooth-brained nematode, but does it really count when that layer is made of flatbread soaked in battery acid? If you're a fedora wearing cheese doodles dust covered failed abortion, you probably want something that makes the gameplay even more like trying to play Scrabble with a mental patient that has a keen interest on putting new fuckholes in you, right? Well, look no further than the duels. This game's dyslexic and alcohol poison answer to boss fights. You're pitted in a one-on-one fight against an enemy that's considerably tougher and has a unique moveset. Most of the time. These duels also limit your access to tools and certain abilities, leaving you with the most basic of movesets imaginable. And since they take away my beloved kunai, it's the worst part of this game. In all actuality, they're fine. You dodge when you need to dodge, you parry when you need to parry, and then put a few caverns worth of slashes through them before you reduce, reuse, and recycle the strategy until you win or come one step closer to slitting your wrists. Outside of the duels, the enemies attack in a mob mentality, often chaining together attacks to overwhelm you with the effectiveness of their stab batons. And that's not even bringing attention to the fucking archers and their variants, who on more than one occasion tempted me to fist myself through the back of my skull in an attempt to end my eternal suffering. This reliance on overwhelming numbers forces the player to take a more stealthy approach to combat. All too often I roleplayed that I was Jerry, and the Mongols were an endless swarm of toms waiting to eat me alive. I'd sneak through little passageways, hide in grass, and take rooftops to survey my surroundings, then pounce on a target pretending my sword was actually a really sharp frying pan that I'm taking to their soft, supple jugulars. This is often the best approach to combat, unlike Sekiro Shadows Perish a grand total of 2 times, where there were always only a few enemies you had to fight at one time, making it easy to whittle down their numbers, on top of the stealth that wasn't exactly fully fleshed out or always possible. Even if there were a swarm of enemies, they'd usually go down in a hit or two, usually couldn't block, or were easy to stagger if they could block. In Tsushima, every enemy will block your attacks if you're ever directly confronting them, and are usually only open after they attack if you hit them with enough heavy attacks or use kunai, the best tool in the game. There is range combat in this game, but it's about as basic as ammonia. You point your bow at the bad guys and then cross-map no-scope them because scopes weren't invented back then, little Timmy. Obviously, all of this isn't really considering the skills and tools that you get after you level up your Legend Boy points, which after acquiring the right ones, makes both direct combat and stealth cakewalks, giving you a sense of power that you don't have fairly early on. Unlike in Sekiro, shadows find themselves in peril a maximum of 2 times, where you're constantly having your face shoved in the bloody mud because get good. Since we're on the topic of upgrading your character, you can upgrade your armor sets, tools, stances, skills, and swords with materials you find around the world, get from missions, get from Mongol camps, or like the hero you are, steal from the peasants for your own personal gain like some sort of reverse Robin Hood. I will go into greater detail, but I'm pretty sure every single-celled organism could understand how this game's RPG light mechanics work in a vacuum. I know this part seems rushed, but I assure you it's not. The gameplay, while refined to a shine comparable to that of the sun, is so simple to explain that my word count is less than the casualties of Tiananmen Square. You'd have to be one of those vaccinations cause autism type of people to not understand what this allegory means. Since I'm assuming most of you watching aren't those people, we can move on to more of the little details of the game that are so numerous that you'd be able to finish reading all of the Harry Potter books and Mein Kampf before I'd finish listing them off. So let me just give you a few that can be downloaded into your big gamer brains. A weird thing I noticed right away is that the lip syncing to language issue is reversed. The lip syncing is English based, so when you use Japanese, it's out of sync with the lips. An odd quirk, especially after playing so many games that had the original issue. This isn't really a detail, I just thought it was funny because I have the sense of humor of an autistic infant. With Rogeria. Since we're on the topic of sound, the sound design and music in this game are unparalleled. While the music doesn't really have any tracks that would get a Nobel Peace Prize in the ocean of wicked sick video game soundtracks, it's still beautiful in its own right, and I would listen to it on its own, especially if I needed to come down from a high of slaying demons. For the sounds, they went above and beyond, not just for the regular gameplay, but in Kurosawa mode as well. In regular gameplay, the sounds are like cum in your ears, in the sense that you didn't know you needed it until it was shoved in there mid-coitus. In Kurosawa mode, the sounds and voices are more compressed or are completely altered to be more in line with the films this game was inspired by. That kind of dedication is how terrorists are made, and I am now afraid. I find it funny that when you heal, you don't use some type of herb, comically large needle, or jamba juice. Instead, you just pat your chest and flex. It gets even worse story-wise, because in the beginning you were clearly filleting that arrow and didn't roar it away like some type of masochistic gorilla. I wish I could do that anytime I stub my pinky toe in the corner of a wall. I mean, I can, but my neighbors would call the police and we already know how that'll go over. I really love the animations in this game. From the brutally satisfying fighting, the horse riding, the goofy ass jumping, to this absolute Chad Thundercock stride. The climbing and facial animations could use a bit of a glow up though. I mean, he and everyone else looks like they had just witnessed the Orlando nightclub massacre firsthand and are still coming to grips with their near-death experience, which they kind of did. Fair enough. But the climbing has no excuse, because Jin literally looks like he has a stick positioned squarely in his lower colon, hindering his ability to move his ducking legs. When you roll in mud, you get progressively dirtier until you're rivaling Oscar the Grouch with the amount of dirt and grime on you. Whew, I can smell that. When you lose all of your health in combat, you don't actually die right away. Instead, an enemy will come over and of mice and men your ass to fully kill you, which is cool because the enemies are just as vulnerable to this themselves, though sometimes enemies go overboard with kicking the shit out of you, like they're all a bunch of Isaac Clarkes in the making. You can pet the foxes after they lead you to a shrine, which is fucking adorable. When Jin cleans blood off of his sword, it will land where it realistically would, making this action extra neat. When the wind blows, not only does the cradle rock, but just about every object that can be realistically swayed or blown up by the wind will actually do so, which I'm glad to see, because hearing wind but seeing trees and grass be stuck in their equivalent of a T-pose is rather disorienting, though the leaves are a bit stiff. I wonder if they've tried acupuncture. Oh, there goes the fever dreams again, whispering sweet nothings into my ear. Jin will sometimes reach down and graze his hand along the pampas grass when walking or riding through it. Bandits and Mongols will sometimes be found slaughtering each other, and it's fun to just sit there and watch and observe them in their natural habitats, fighting for dominance. This one is a quality of life change that all video game devs should take note of. When you're riding with a partner during a quest, they match your walking speed, meaning if you're sprinting, they're sprinting. When you're crip walking, they're crip walking. Though sometimes the NPCs will go at their own pace for legitimate reasons, like rushing into battle like a lemming only to have me sitting back and staring at them, wonder why even bother saving these people. If the gaming devs at large don't spread this change to future games, you'll never see me again, because I'll be reading up on how to drop an atomic bomb quietly. Just for future reference. The rain in this game actually flows off of rooftops in a realistic manner, kinda like my tears if I could cry. That bowing emote does several things. You can honor the fallen, giving you some different dialogue depending on the things you bow near, bow to peasants, or pull a god and summon a plague of frogs. Wait, was that how the story went? I don't know, I don't read my Emperor Jim's Bible very often. Whew! I think that's enough for me. My head is pounding and there's a slightly viscous fluid leaking from my ear holes. I think this is one of the only games I've ever played where I've had so much fun playing it, but absolutely hated a third of the game more than I hate my own life. And unlike my life, I can't refund this game because I bought the shit digitally because I hate being clinically sane. If you want to subject yourself to a proctocolectomy, then be my guest, but I'm rubbing my bloodied hands clean of this game because I already have a million reasons to kill myself and I don't need the lack of big anime titties to be a million and one. I can't recommend this game to anyone unless you're Japanese and want a playable version of an alternate history hub video titled "What if the Japs got the gas up the ass instead of the Jews in the putrid pews?" or something like that. I think my brain is melted down to a fine paste and is currently evacuating my ear canal. So just like my will to live, I'm going to leave without saying, "Go! I'm going zeba zaba zooba da bop."